Hello and welcome to this newest fireside chat hosted by SGS. Today we are going to talk about human agency and human oversight. My name is Willy Fabricius and I'm the Global Head for Strategy and Business Development in Business Assurance here at SGS. Today we have two guests from the Know Center in Graz, Austria. We have Simone and Angela, and I would like to ask both of you ladies to introduce yourself to the audience, please. Simone, want to go ahead first?
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Simone Kobajnik. I'm a key researcher and co-lead of the Fair AI group at the Know Center located here in Graz. And the Know Center is a research center, an international research center for Trustworthy AI. And we do research among the 7 requirements of Trustworthy AI as defined by the European Union's AI Act, basically. And we have research areas that focus on specific aspects of this. My background is in computer science. But I'm working quite transdisciplinary with psychologists and legal advice very often. And I'm very keen to discuss about this topic today.
Thank you so much.
So, a warm welcome also from my side. Thank you for having me here in this fireside chat. My name is Angela Fessel. I'm also, similar to Simone, a senior researcher at the Know Center, in my case in the Department of Digital Transformation Design. I have a background in computer science as well, and in our team we are mostly working on educational technologies, data-driven business models, and we are also dealing with AI, especially in the auditing domain.
Thank you very much. So that makes 3 of us with computer science background. But it's really interesting for me that computer science people are very much concerned now about the implications of AI. And obviously, one of the subjects is talking about human agency and human oversight. Would you mind to explain to me what is the difference and how are those things, coming together, please?
So, generally spoken, human agency refers to the capacity of individuals to act independently, make their own choices, and impose these choices to the world. If we now relate human agency to AI or AI systems, human agency refers to the capacity and autonomy of individuals and groups to influence, to control, but also to make decisions about the development, the deployment, and also the use of AI systems. So it emphasizes the roles of humans in guiding how AI is especially integrated into this society and ensures, and this is very important, that these systems serve human interests and values. If we go to human oversight in general refers to the process of monitoring or supervising or also guiding activities, systems, and processes, and in order to ensure that they align with the intended goals and standards and also ethical considerations. So in relation to AI, human oversight refers specific to processes, to mechanisms, which allows humans to monitor, to supervise, and to regulate AI systems to ensure that they operate as intended and adhere to ethical standards. These 2 concepts are closely related to each other, and they are also often used synonymously, but in the end, they are not the same. Human agency refers to the very broad idea that humans as intentional actors should be in control, and human oversight is more specifically related to how AI systems are used and suggests that AI systems should not operate entirely on their own, but that humans have the possibility to oversee what the AI system or the way in which the AI system really works. In order to be able to establish human agency and oversight, Humans who are using or working with AI systems and who have to oversee these systems need to be able to acquire or need to have already AI-related competences and skills. This goes in the direction of AI literacy. These competences and skills are necessary to be able to understand and engage with AI systems to a satisfying degree. So AI literacy can be seen as one of the prerequisites for establishing human agency and oversight.
Okay. You mentioned ethics, and I totally get it to a certain degree, because in the interest of full disclosure, usually I'm calling in and moderating this fireside chats from Chicago. But this week I'm actually at the Privacy Symposium here in Venice, Italy. And yesterday we talked about, of course, AI and privacy. I mean, what conference in 2024 is not talking about AI, right? Especially in the domain of privacy. And one speaker actually pointed out something very interesting, and I think it's very important, that ethics is not necessarily universal. Ethics has a huge cultural component, has a huge country-specific component, regional component, and we cannot forget that. And we cannot just simply say, well, from an ethical point of view in the EU, blah, 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 that might be true for this jurisdiction, that might be true for this group of countries, but at the same time, ethics definitely has some global implications and differences between different countries. But that said, Simone, from your perspective, why is it so important to adhere to the principles of human agency and human oversight? Well, what is your take on that?
So maybe I can just continue in what you said, because as you argued, ethics is very context specific and culturally dependent. And one idea of human oversight is that the combination, the interaction or collaboration of a human and a machine can do a task better than only the machine or only the human. So in one of these tasks, the hypothesis is that one of these tasks that human can do better is to adapt to culture differences and to correct AI results, maybe towards the cultural context of the application. So following up on that, and maybe going back to your question, Angela, thank you very much for introducing the concept so well. So the principle of AI, human agency and human oversight should be to make sure that the broad introduction of AI-based systems that does not take place at the cost of human agency and human rights per se, right? So that's why it's so important to adhere to these principles. And this need for this additional safety layer of human oversight is well grounded, because as of to date, we have more than 3,000 collected AI incidents that you can look up at the AI incident database if you're keen to do so. And obviously, given the many obstacles we face introducing the AI system, it's very smart to introduce systematic procedures and regulations for monitoring algorithmic processes. And if you look at human oversight, it is a very simplified interpretation, but it can be seen as an instrument to maintain human control to a certain degree. And as such, it can be installed to foster rights and ethical norms. Basically, it enacts a human actor as a control instance at the end of the system, right? Or somewhere in the loop of the system. This can be as simple as providing an emergency button to be pushed if something gets out of hand. For instance, if on a production site, if a robot might threaten a worker of some kind, there might be a human agent that reacts and pushes the button to stop the procedure. But it can also become very complex, for instance, in medical devices or in HR systems, where people have to reassess decisions that an AI presents to them. So
following up
yeah,
with
it
the
is,
HR. So
has a
sorry
very
for
broad spectrum.
very sorry for interrupting, Simone, but following up with the example of an HR system, let's face it, on a regular basis, these automated systems are not necessarily recommending something, but they are also filtering out something. So in an HR system, of course, people would send their resumes, their CVs, and then that AI system would automatically filter out certain resumes for whatever reason, and then present the good results, so to speak, to the recruiter, to the HR person. So
Right.
how would, in that particular case, human oversight function? I mean, would we expect some kind of sampling taking place? Would we expect some kind of regular reviews? What could be methodologies to get that off the ground?
I guess that's a very sensitive question because it depends on the context, right? What should be the aim of the human oversight, and that also depends on the system and on the application area. So in this case, in the design of what human oversight should look like, there would need to be the aim to look for unfair behavior already, I guess, to spot this. I don't know, Angeli, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's important to consider human users and people right from when you start designing an AI system. So, I mean, typically developers, technicians are developing an AI system and they're happy that the AI system works. But right from the beginning, and especially from the human-computer-centered perspective, or also from the designing perspective, you always have to take the human into account. And especially for AI systems, there are some different levels or different possibilities how humans can interact with these AI systems. These concepts, or there are four concepts that are now strongly related to these AI systems, namely human in the loop, human on the loop, human in command, and human out of the loop. And in the end, they represent different levels of how humans can be involved in the decision-making processes of AI systems. So if we go a little bit deeper into these four concepts, human in the loop, also human in the loop refers to the systems where human operators are actively involved in the decision of an AI system, in the decision process, because they really interact with the AI system, review, for example, the suggestions, review the actions, provide maybe some feedback, corrections before the system really acts. One example, and this is also what Simone already mentioned, in the medical healthcare or in medical diagnostics, for example, an AI system might really help in presenting or suggesting a potential diagnosis. But in the end, it's the physician, so the human, that has to review this diagnosis and then finalize the diagnosis. And he or she could then say, yes, this was correct, or no, this was not correct, and we have to adjust it. Human on the loop involves systems where human operators more or less oversee the functioning of an AI system, but they do not really intervene in real time, except, and here again comes the human into play, when it's absolutely necessary. So I give you another example for this. If you think about these autonomous vehicles that are driving on their own, maybe a human operator could, from outside, monitor the vehicle's performance remotely and look how this car, behaves and if it does everything correct or whatever. But in case of emergency, the operator has to immediately react and stop the car or do whatever. The third concept I mentioned was this human in command. This is a kind of scenario where humans have overarching authority and control over the AI system, This is where the persons are setting goals, are setting policies, are setting operational parameters. So to make this AI system safe and that it is ethically compliant and that it follows all the regulations and rules set by law, etc. And an example, for example, regulatory bodies, for example, setting the ethical guidelines for the deployment of AI systems, maybe into healthcare or other settings. In healthcare, the goal is really to ensure the patient safety and also, for example, data privacy. Very, very important. Human out of the loop, as the last of these four concepts, describes systems where humans' involvement is minimal, available, or not existent in the decision-making process. And one very plakative example is there are vehicle production assembly lines, and you can all imagine where a robot is assembling parts of the car. And typically there is no person involved, so the robot is doing this without human interaction. So in order to establish human agency and oversight, as I said at the beginning, it is really, really crucial to think about how the humans are involved in, or how the humans can operate or deal with AI systems in order to balance with safety, with ethical standards, in order to really make human oversight possible.
Thank you very much. From the audience, there was a comment related to responsibility and accountability with regards to AI. And obviously, we discussed that already in a previous fireside chat. But Simone, can you make that connection, please, between human oversight and agency, respectively, the connection to responsibility and accountability, if you don't mind?
I didn't manage to read the comment actually.
Okay, so I read the comment for you. Hi, responsibility and accountability. When we use AI and it fails, is it the machine who is responsible, or is it the user, the company who is responsible? I mean, at the end of the day, who takes responsibility? Who is accountable for AI systems doing something stupid? And obviously that has something to do with human agency and oversight, right? Because at the end of the day, I cannot just say, oh yeah, it wasn't me, it was the AI. No, I'm not just overlooking it. I'm responsible for the thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. It depends. It's not the user that is responsible for the failing of the system, I would say, but I'm not an expert in accountability. I think that's the topic of the next chat with our legal person, Kerstin. But in terms of responsibility, of course, if you have human oversight in some kind implemented in your AI, that would be to make sure that the result is not harmful and is ethically what we expect. That would be the responsibility of the person. But legally, I'm not sure if it's the person or the provider of the software who would be responsible. That we would need to ask somebody else. But taking over responsibility of the human overseer, I think, is an important aspect of the role, for sure. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I appreciate that reference to the legal domain, but at the same time, I also believe that we as the users have responsibility to still think. And Exhibit A, as they say, is using some kind of mapping GPS software. And by the way, real life experience, I had that driving around, and for whatever reason, the GPS system brings me down a road where there is a beam protecting me from driving into the lake. But according to the GPS system, there is a road. Of course I stop. Of course I reverse. That kind of thing, right? I mean, it's also the user's responsibility to take the information from the AI, compute it in our brain, and then take the necessary action. It's like, let's say an AI system gives an totally erroneous advice to a physician while operating on a patient. Of course, the physician is still the physician and is responsible for that, right? Regardless whether the AI suggested something or not.
Yeah,
And I think that's the reason is
that's
it's not just the provider, but it's also the community or the user in this case, who ultimately also has a responsibility for human oversight. So that's the reason why I see that connection.
And for sure that demands a certain level of human agency, like have the user informed about the context of the application, because the car is a very simple example, but it can be much more complex in the situation, and also give certain information of the causality of how the result was calculated.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
The only, let's say, real problem I see is that I have that concern, I must admit, that AI systems will really lead to a dummification of people. We will use more and less and less of our gray cells and think less and less because, well, the system tells me, right? And I think we as users, we as operators, so to speak, we need to understand that we still have the responsibility for the outcome, regardless what kind of tool we are using. But that said, Simone, I've got another question for you.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, your research focuses on fairness in AI. So do you see some kind of overlap between, fairness and human agency and oversight?
Yeah, good question. Well, one of the main aims of human oversight is to make the algorithmic outcome safe, but also it's to adhere to ethical standards. And this understanding of ethical standards, of course, encompasses the concepts of non-discrimination and fairness for all concerned parties within the system. So this is basically how it's encapsulated. Fairness is encapsulated in human oversight in the concepts. And fairness research, on the other hand, draws heavily from cognitive and social research. And we assume that all human behavior carries bias, right? And this bias is reflected in data and can enter AI systems throughout the life cycle. So basically, bias and unfair bias can enter AI systems wherever there is human touch points. And this ultimately may lead to unfair results. So I know that was a bit long, but if you can follow my argument, you might understand there are two aspects here in how human oversight and fairness overlap. First, the human overseeing person, or the human that's overseeing the process, is responsible for promoting fairness. But simultaneously, the very same person is also a potential source of bias that's introduced in the system. And this is a highly relevant and flourishing topic of research in this field. And I don't know if you have an idea, but the questions form around how we can monitor and guide human actors so they do their jobs properly and deliver what we in the research subject is called effective human oversight. So being well committed to the aim of their task and guided to not introduce extra bias to the system. Hope that was making any sense.
Sure, but then there's still that question of bias. Is bias always negative? Is there something like positive bias, right? And I know that in the, let's say, casual conversational English, the word bias has some kind of negative connotation, right? But fundamentally, the question would be, maybe there is something like positive bias. And if that is the case, how can we benefit from that and reduce the impact of the negative bias, right?
I mean, bias is not per se negative, of course. It's bias helps us to react in certain situation in ways that are fast and effective enough. something that we learn with society, with education, and so on. It's instincts sometimes as well. So it's not necessarily conscious. It might be those to some degree.
Yes.
When we distinguish in fairness research, we distinguish between bias that's inherent in human behavior and unfair bias, which actually leads to results that either favor a certain group of people or individuals or disregard them to some degree or treat them unfairly, say.
Right.
So that's unfair bias. And maybe in human oversight, there might be very obvious biases such as racial bias. So what is if the human overseer does not fit the intention of the task or does not have the right intentions for the task? And if you have the example for racial bias, if you have a college admission system and the human overseer intentionally overrides all the admissions for ethnically non-white people, then this is a very bad example. Usually we assume that bias is introduced without bad intention, but that might be a problem, right? Because we have the bias in the data and the AI because we capture that in human behavior, and we have the societal norms that actually allowed that for a very long time.
Yes, and it's not just human behavior, right? I mean, recently on one of my trips, I had the privilege to talk with a university in Hong Kong who has literally millions of slides, microscopic slides that are now getting scanned for training AI systems related to identifying cancer. Now let's have a quick view at the population in Hong Kong over the last, I don't know, 100 years. There is a certain group of people that is predominant, and then there are 2 or 3 other groups of people that are less dominant. But then there are other ethnic groups that are not represented whatsoever because, well, there are not that many people from, let's say, Africa living in Hong Kong, let alone being treated for cancer in a Hong Kong hospital. So that in itself, the kind of data that is available for training the AI will automatically influence how the AI comes to decisions or recommendations. And that kind of data quality, for lack of a better word, obviously has a significant impact on the results, right? But moving on to another question for Angelia.
As you say, sorry, lack of a better word. I think the term data quality is something we have to overthink in its complexity completely because it has become so much more with the implementation of AI, the broad implementation of AI.
Yes, and we all know crap in, crap out, right? Bad data in, bad data out. It's nothing new conceptually. We all know about that, but unfortunately, I think with the event of AI systems and their capabilities, it's really getting amplified. Let's move on with the next question. I'm obviously also conscious of time, so just another 4 questions or so. What is necessary to establish human agency and an oversight in the context of AI systems from a human-centered perspective?
As I, as I said already before, it's really important to take into account the human in order to be able to establish human agency and oversight, and especially now in times where AI systems, ChatGPT, for example, permits all of us, all of our aspects in our lives, in our work. So in the end, what we need to do is to educate or train humans. Thus, the idea is to make them some kind of AI literate. So AI literacy in the end summarizes knowledge, skills, and competencies that are necessary in order to be able to effectively interact with or critically evaluate or use AI systems and technologies in order to be able to understand what an AI system, for example, is doing. This means that being AI literate enables individuals to navigate the complexities of AIs in various contexts, and including personal, educational, and professional environments. So in the end, you need to have the skills and competencies that you know how to deal with AI. So far, and as we are coming a little bit from, as we are coming from science, there does not exist any common definition of what AI literacy is exactly all about. But there already now exists some different curriculi, um, and for these curricula, there exist some components that should be typically available in this regard. Let me give you some examples. So there should, every one of us, and should have some basic understanding of general AI concepts. For example, we all should know what AI is and what machine learning, for example, is, but also if we work in the domain of AI systems, what the difference between machine learning and conventional programming is, for example. There are often these words like machine learning, deep learning, neural network, deep reinforcement learning, natural language processing, and all these buzzwords. At least all of us should know, I don't say very deep, but all of us should know to a certain extent what is meant with these buzzwords so that you understand the basics of it. As we discussed some minutes ago, critical thinking, this asking if the AI provides the right, correct, or answer and be ethically fair, be ethically correct. As Simone just said, this goes also into the idea of providing bias and fairness. Be aware of these topics. Awareness of bias in AI, and you need to know or need to cope with them to mitigate them in order to ensure fair and ethical use of AI. This is very, very important. Privacy and security. It's important to understand the implications on AI or of AI on privacy, on data security, and how to protect sensitive information, for example. Critical thinking goes also in the direction of societal or social impact. So whenever you establish an AI system, you should think about or know if maybe there is a broader societal impact of the AI, including the effects on employment, for example, on social interactions, or on global inequalities, to make it a bit broader. On the other hand, although AI can do a lot of positive things, we also should be aware of challenges and risks. Deepfakes. So, for example, AI technologies can create highly realistic but fake images, fake videos, fake audio recordings. And for a human, even, it's really, really sometimes not even anymore possible to detect or find out if an image was created by an AI or is a real image. Another challenge or risk in this regard are sharing of fake news. AI-powered bots can amplify the spread of fake news by sharing or liking false information on different social media platforms, for example. Very difficult. So in order to establish human agency and oversight, it is really important for all of us to acquire the respective competences and skills regarding AI. So as we are all in the near or in the future have to deal with AI systems. And teaching humans in AI literacy is, I think, at least from my perspective, very, very important. And in the end, we should start this training or education already in school, but also for us, for those people who are currently also in their work life, we also should have the possibility to acquire the respective competences and skills in this regard, because AI comes, it's here to stay, and we have to cope with it.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely paramount to emphasize the importance of literacy, general knowledge, how things work. And it baffles me still why it is so important and still important to re-emphasize to everyone to change their passwords on a regular basis, teaching everyone again for the thousandth and second time why passwords should not be 4 characters long, and things like that, right? I mean, we all have been exposed to that training or these kind of trainings for multiple years now, and still it's necessary to repeat that. And yes, everyone should know that by now, but I'm also very conscious that, well, as humans, we have the tendency to forget and to get lax going and easy going after a while. Yeah, I'm not important, so I don't need to do that. And all of a sudden, it will hit us. But coming to the next session or question, Peter Drucker is famous for saying something like, you can't improve what you don't measure. So in this context, Simone, how can human agency, human oversight, how can that be measured? Any ideas of what could be KPIs, process indicators that tell us as an organization whatever we do is better than last month or worse than last year?
Yeah. I guess the most basic approaches are to measure the prerequisites. And I can connect to what Angela just said. So one prerequisite for human oversight and also human agency is AI literacy. And this is very relevant, as about 2 in 5 people are even unaware that AI enables common applications that they use, and even more, like 45% of people worldwide are not aware of AI being part of social media. That's actually the result of a study from Queensland University. But for AI literacy, for instance, it's as it is a set of competences that you learn, which is quite, I would say, traditional. It can be part of education and as such be measured by the traditional means, such as knowledge tests, certification, formal degrees, of course, always adapted on the task that the person needs to do. And yeah, that's for AI literacy. A second concept that's also quite related to human agency and oversight is understandability. So users need to be able to understand the system they work with. And this is a question of how well effective users can handle a system. So a question of system design and a question of user capabilities. And this can be investigated with traditional usability tests as well. If you look at human oversight as a complex as a concept which is much newer, there is a body of ongoing research on how to adequately determine and assess a proper level of human involvement. In my understanding, I would say the main summative question should be to evaluate how well a human actor can achieve the intended objective of the oversight task. That could be, for instance, how well can a human actor mitigate risks or assure fairness in the context of the application. But I very recently read a very interesting publication as well on how to actually assess human oversight in a more granular way with the framework of 4 dimensions. And they defined the layers of the sufficiency of causal power. So is the human in a position, or has the human the right abilities and power to do the job? The second one is epistemic access. Is the right information and context information provided to the human actor that has to do the job? Then the third one is self-control. And this is about whether the personal abilities of a human fit the task they have to do. So this could be in terms of cognitive abilities, concentration abilities, the capacity to meet or to react in a proper time frame of response times, or also motivation. And finally, the fourth layer is does the user's intention fit the job?
Okay.
Which is rather a moral question, and I guess this could be addressed depending on the context and assessed to certain means. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, when I hear measurements in the context of literature, I think about learning effectiveness. I'm thinking about the 4 levels of training effectiveness from Kirkpatrick, which are reaction, learning, behavior, results. And to your point, it's really nothing new. This kind of theory has been around for some time now, but obviously, because it's old doesn't mean that we can forget it. It's actually very proven, very well established, and should be used and can be used also in this particular domain. So why not considering something that has been around for some years? But let's have 2 more questions. But before we have those questions among this team here, I would like also the audience I would like to encourage the audience, not just say, hello from whatever country you are. And by the way, we have literally more than 20 countries represented here. So I counted. I really would like to encourage the audience, please put in questions that we might be able to answer. But coming to the next question, how can it be ensured that AI systems assist in enhancing human agency and oversight? So how can we potentially use AI systems to, well, help us with the oversight potentially of another AI system?
Yeah. Well, it always goes around the human. It's always user-centered. So in the end, in order to be able to ensure that AI systems can assist human agency and oversight, you need to really think about key design considerations that need to be taken into account when you start thinking about or designing an AI system. These considerations, the goal is to balance the autonomy of AI with the necessity of human control and being, again, ethically aligned and have the ability to maintain transparency and accountability, for example. But let me give you some examples of key considerations, and be aware that I will just give some examples of this. There are many more of these considerations that you have or should take into account when you design an AI system. So let's have a look at from the user's perspective. So if you're typically you design an AI system that a user is that is controlled or should be used by a user. So in the end, the system should be designed in a way that the user's needs, the user's goals, the user's preferences should be taken into account. This means that already at the design time, during the design process, the users, the stakeholders, and their feedback and their requirements need to be taken into account. This is known under the process of user-centered design, co-design, or participatory design, speaking from a science perspective. But the goal is really take into account the target users for whom the AI system is designed for, and also include them in the design process. Another consideration is to design intuitive user interfaces. So the interfaces need to be user-friendly, they need to be intuitive, they need to be easy to use. This helps users really to effectively control and understand AI's definitions and how to cope with the system. Other considerations should go into the direction of transparency as well as explainability. Explainable AI suggests that systems should provide some kind of clear and understandable explanations why they decided as they decided. And this should be made comprehensible for the user so that the user really understands what the AI system is and how the AI system reaches the conclusion it suggests. Transparency goes also in this direction. It should ensure the system's functioning and decision-making processes, and that the system shows how or which steps have been taken during this operation, for example, in order to build trust and facilitates oversight, human oversight. Traceability, also very, very important. It must be ensured that all decisions that are made by the AI can be traced back to the origin in order to allow also the auditors, for example, if we are talking now about the auditing domain, to reproduce how the system came to the conclusion in the end and to see if this works or not. Other considerations go in the direction of ethical and legal compliance. So in the end, guidelines need to be implemented to ensure that AI systems really adhere to ethical standards. We had this already from Simone, fairness, bias, that they are non-discriminative and that they respect the user autonomy. And also regarding law, for example, AI systems needs to be ensured that they comply with relevant laws and regulations. For example, data protection or privacy laws. So, as I said, in order to to ensure that AI systems assist in enhancing human agency and oversight, there are a lot of really, really key considerations that need to be taken into account. Otherwise, it will not work.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm looking at the clock, and obviously I'm conscious of time. So Simone, one last question for you. Can you think of an example where it might be necessary to limit the degree of human agency or human oversight? Or shall they be always at 100%, always?
Well, maybe yes. So in some cases, it certainly makes sense to restrict human agency to a certain degree. So don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about restricting access to information or intentionally manipulating users, but just taking away a certain degree of freedom.
Yeah.
And this needs to be in accordance with the requirements of a specific task. So out of my head, what I could think of are, for instance, safety systems, where AI-driven processes mean to protect human workers. For example, a machine is not able to be started, or a human cannot start operating a machine until all workers have left the room or have put on their safety gear. If this is a strict and necessary safety regulation, we wouldn't want individuals to have the option to bypass this, right? Another example is when users should not have the freedom to make a decision because they do not understand the subject matter. For instance, was the case with parental control or child safety features in digital entertainment systems. Here it is very intentional to limit young users' access to certain information and prevent them from adapting the setting. And then the last thing that could be an application case is in situations where human error could have significantly harmful consequences. So, for instance, in medical devices, we have users that can adjust the treatment program, but they wouldn't be allowed to adjust the radiation intensity within this program. So in this sense, I would conclude that the analysis of human and automation abilities needs to be done for each AI system on a task level to decide whether it's sensible to limit human autonomy or to provide personal freedom.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, for example, the example of the safety mechanism in a machine, right? I can easily see that there's some kind of a camera system that watches whether there are hands or not in that danger zone. Of course, the operator must not be able to override that, because otherwise the hands are gone. It's a straightforward example where human oversight might be not a good thing. I mean, it's better that the machine is not running at all and no production is done, rather than writing the incident report for 2 hands lost. That said, any final words before we wrap it up? Otherwise, I say thank you very much. I mean, ladies, any final words? Nope.
I think we have very, very interesting and challenging times in front of us, especially with this upcoming generative AI things that is now available to everybody. I think, yeah, there's a lot of work for us to do in order to be able that all of us can really work and use AI in a responsible and safe way. So a lot of things to do for the future, I would say.
I very much agree with you, Angela, and I'm so keen to see how research will develop within the next couple of years in this field, and how interdisciplinary research will develop as well.
Yes. Well, that's it. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much to the audience for attending. And I would also like to use this opportunity to inform everyone that we will have another fireside chat currently scheduled for July the 8th. And in this fireside chat, we will talk about accountability and how accountability is important in the context of AI. That said, thank you very, very much again. Looking forward to welcoming you the next time on July the 8th. Bye-bye and take care.